So very often I get asked, what lens should I buy first? Anytime I'm teaching a workshop, anytime I'm doing a one-on-one mentor session, it's the same question over and over. If they're starting out, they'll say, what lens should I buy first? There are so many options. I have no idea what to get. What should I buy? And my answer is always the same, because this lens gives you versatility. With the creative flair you can create in your images, it can work for many, many different types of sessions, whether you're a family photographer or a portrait photographer or a nature photographer. It doesn't really matter what you shoot. This lens can work for all of it. And the thing I love most about this lens is it saves you time during your session. So if you want to know what lens you should get first, which is the lens I got first and I still use to this day, 10 years later, it never comes off my camera. Well, very rarely comes off my camera, but it hardly ever comes off my camera is the point. If you want to know what this lens is, then keep on watching. Hello. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to go over something that is asked a million times. So for those of you who are new here, I am Tia. I am an editorial portrait photographer. I have been shooting for over a decade, and I now teach workshops. I do one-on-one mentor sessions. I just basically love sharing the knowledge that I've learned over the last 10 years with other photographers who are newer on their journey, who want to make their dreams a reality. So throughout all of my years of shooting, just meeting other photographers, teaching my workshops, doing my one-on-one mentor sessions, I am constantly asked, what lens should I buy? Anybody who's new to photography, you know how overwhelming it can be to figure out what gear to buy, even what camera brand to go with. You've got Nikon, you've got Canon, you've got Sony, you've got all of these different brands, and it's so hard when you're starting out to know what all you should buy. So, of course, there could be a million answers to this question, for sure. And every photographer has their brand that they love or their lens that they love. But I'm just here to tell you what worked for me, what I started out with, and what I still use today, because it's pretty much the same setup as it was. I've just upgraded, but overall, the camera and the lens has really not changed much in my 10 years of shooting. So the question I get asked all the time is, what lens should I buy? There are a million lenses. Do I get a prime? Do I get a zoom? What focal length works best? What's the most versatile? And I can say without a doubt, the lens that I have used since the beginning of my photography career is the 24-70 2.8. So I pulled my little camera bag up here for you guys. This is the bag that I take everywhere with me to all of my sessions. I love it so much. I will link it in the description box. I can't remember if this is the style of bag or the brand, but it's Carleen. And this bag is awesome. I carry it with me all the time. I shoot, 3-4 days a week, carry it with me, lug it around, throw it in my kitchen. Very durable. Love this thing. But that's not why you're here. You are here to hear about the lens. So I'm just pulling my camera bag out so you can see literally this lens is always on my camera. So this is my camera setup, and the strap, because I always get asked this, the strap is by a brand called Violet May. I want to say they're in Australia. I can't fully remember, but I want to say that's what it is. But anyway, it's a great crossbody strap. But anyway, this is like my setup. This is my camera that I take to every session, and I'm just going to go over quickly what I have now, and then I'm going to go over what I started with 10 years ago, because obviously after 10 years I was able to upgrade to this bad boy right here. So let's start with this. I have the Canon R6. I was debating between the R5 and the R6, and when I was at my local camera store, they were basically telling me, if you're not really shooting videography, the R6 is really going to be all you need. Like, you don't need to spend the extra money to get the R5. So that's what I decided to go with. Before this, I had a Canon 5D Mark IV that I had upgraded to, and I only had it for like a year, and I just hated the focusing system in the EF version of Canon. So whenever they came out with mirrorless, and I switched to this, the focusing was so much better, and the grain is so much better in low light situations. So I have the Canon R6, and the lens, which is what you're all here for, the lens that I love, that I could not live without, if you took my 24-70 away from me, I would die. So this is the 24-70 2.8 L series lens, and it's the mirrorless version. It's not EF, it's RF. But if you're not mirrorless and you still have like the 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV, 6D, 7D, the EF version of the lens is the same, 2.8 24-70. So this is a zoom lens. Now, I hear photographers debating all the time about zoom lenses versus prime lenses. And of course I'm biased because this is the lens that I started with, and it's the lens that I just feel is too versatile for me to ever commit to a prime. I do own a prime, but I never really put it on my camera except for very specific situations. This 24-70 does not come off my camera. I cannot stress that enough. Every single session that I shoot, when I go into my studio for the day and I pull out my camera, this 24-70 is what is always on it. So the reason that I am so much a diehard fan of the 24-70 is for these main reasons. A, it can work for almost any session that you're shooting. If you're a photographer that's just starting out, chances are you're most likely going to be doing some family work, shooting some kiddos, even if it's just kiddos in your personal family, in your personal life. You're going to be shooting kiddos, you're going to probably be shooting families, you're going to be shooting maybe headshots, maybe some branding, maybe some, I don't know, product photography. But when we're first starting out, I feel the majority of us kind of start with families and just portraits in general. This lens is amazing for portraits because you can zoom all the way out to 24 to be at a wider angle, to get more of the background, to see more of the scenic views outside. If you're shooting in a field or you're shooting in the mountains or you're shooting downtown and you want, you know, all the skyscrapers and things like that in it, you can zoom out to 24 and get a ton of the background scenery. But the great thing about the 24-70 is you can zoom in to all the way to 70 and you can get really flattering portraits of the face. So if you're newer to photography, when you are shooting at a wider angle, like a 24 or a 35, and then you get close up on the subject to get like close up headshots or portraits of that person, in those wider angle lenses, you're going to get distortion in the face. Whatever is closest to the lens is going to elongate. So it can make their foreheads look bigger or their nose look bigger. And it just can kind of distort the shape of their face. It kind of brings the face out toward the lens more when you're shooting with a wide angle lens and getting close on your subject. So if you can use a closer, like if you're zooming, instead of being at 24, you can zoom all the way into 70 if you have this lens and then come closer to your subject, and the portrait on their face is so much more flattering. The features are flatter, they're not protruding out to the camera. The symmetry of the face is much better and the features align with each other. And if you get on YouTube and you just Google focal length comparisons or, you know, lens comparisons for portraits, anything like that, if you get on YouTube and just search for that, you will find a million videos and examples side by side of what different lenses do. Everything from like a 24 to a 35 to a 50 to a 70 to an 85 to a 100 millimeter lens. It's going to show you how the face changes in close-up portraits as you move along those focal lengths. So that's why I love this lens so much. I can zoom out to 24 when I'm getting their full body and I want to make them look longer or I want to get more of the background scenery. But I can also, standing in the exact same spot, zoom in and get a really flattering up-close portrait of their face without distorting the features of their face. And in a 24 and a 35, you can't do that. Portraits are best, in my opinion, if you are at a 50 millimeter or higher. So that's what I love about the 24-70 is I've got everything from 24 all the way to 70, and I literally don't have to move my body. So that's another thing about this lens that I love. That's one of my main points. Not only can you shoot pretty much everything with this lens, all different kinds of sessions, families, portraits, sports, nature, headshots, product photography. I do all of those things with this lens. But on top of that, this lens saves you time during your session. So here's one of the main things I always use as an example when I'm talking to my students about this. If you are shooting a family and you've got them in focus, and it's a full body shot. You've got all this beautiful scenery behind them of the trees and the woods or the ocean or whatever it is in your scene. You're zoomed out. You can get a full body shot of them, and they've got little kids, and you know kids don't stay still for very long. I have 3 of my own. They never stay still for pictures. So just imagine if you did not have a zoom, say you're shooting with a 35, which I know a lot of family photographers really love their 35 prime lenses. Say you're at a 35, that's all you've got on your camera, and you're set up, you've got this full body shot with all this scenery behind them, and the shot is absolutely perfect. Well then, say you want to get that exact same shot, but much closer up so that it gets more of just their faces instead of their full bodies, and you try to run up to them to grab that shot before the kids move, and a lot of times it doesn't happen. The kids have run away before you can physically move your body closer to the scene to get the shot at that closer up angle that you want. Now, go back and think of this same situation, but you've got your 24-70 on. So I have them in focus. I have their full bodies of the whole family in the shot. And I know that the kids are about to run away because, they don't stay for very long. I can take that shot and then zoom in without ever moving my body and be much closer on their faces and take that same shot without moving my body. So I can get those 2 shots within a matter of a second. So literally I can be here, click, take the shot, zoom in, click, take the shot. Took me like 2 seconds. You could not do that if you were if you were using a prime lens, say a 35. You would literally have to run your body over to that family and try to grab the shot while the kiddos are still being still. And again, that is very hard to do when you've got young kiddos in the shot. So that is one of my main reasons for using this lens, is that you can save so much time during your session, and you can get close up and far away shots without ever moving your body. So without you having to move, then you're all of a sudden getting far away shots and close-up shots within a few seconds of each other, giving you more time to do different poses throughout your session because you're not wasting so much time running to your client, running back, running to them, running back. It's really hard when you're in a prime, but when you have a zoom, you can literally just stand in the same place, take the far away shot, the full body shot, and then zoom in and take the close-up shot. And this is the same even if you're doing just a solo session. Like say you're shooting a high school senior and you love this beautiful scenic shot that you're getting, but it's a perfect pose, and before the wind blows their hair into their face or whatever, you also want to get a close-up shot of that exact same pose. Well, with this lens, you can take the full body shot and then you can zoom in and grab the closer up shot. So being able to zoom in without moving your body is one of the main reasons that I love this lens. I can get so many shots during a session, so many more shots during a session than somebody using a prime lens could, just because I'm not having to move my body back and forth to them when I want a different, close up or far away shot of their bodies. So that's the second reason that I super duper love this lens. And then the third reason, honestly, if I really thought about it, I probably have a million reasons that I love this lens. But the main reasons that I love them are those first 2 points that I made. And then also just that you can create such cool angles with this lens because you can zoom in and zoom all the way out. So when I am shooting, say I'm doing an editorial portrait session, which is what I shoot most often, and the subject is in a perfect pose, like standing tall and just like really cool, maybe hands in the pocket. I can stand level with them, take the full body shot, then let me zoom out. I can take the picture of them full body shot, then I can zoom in, get an up close picture of that same pose, and then I can drop myself down to the floor. I've dubbed it my drop it low angle. I've got an email going out about it soon too. So if you're not on the email list, you should definitely opt in. You can find that linked in the description box and also on my Instagram page. But I can drop it low all the way down to the ground, zoom all the way back out to 24, tilt my lens up, and then get a completely different perspective of this same pose. I've just made their legs look a million miles long. I've made them look taller. I've made the shot look much more interesting. And all I did was zoom out to 24, drop down low, get close to my subject, and shoot upward. And it just makes the shot absolutely incredible. It's my favorite angle to do during my editorial sessions. But sometimes I do want to zoom in and get just a really flattering image close up of their face. And when I zoom into 70, I can easily do that. So the versatility that you get with this, the fact that you can shoot families and portraits and nature and sports and whatever else you want to shoot, and you can save time during your sessions not running back and forth to your subject to get full body and close-up shots, and the fact that you can create really cool perspectives and angles by zooming in and zooming out and just changing your body where you're at and where you're shooting, if you're shooting down on them or you're shooting up on them. It is just honestly an all-around versatile, amazing lens. So mine is the L series lens. The L series lens obviously is the more expensive line of lenses in the Canon line. I'm a Canon girl. I will always be Canon. I will shoot Canon probably until the day that I die. But I just, after doing all the research and just hearing from other photographers, and I'm sure you'll hear this all the time, it is better to save up for the nicer lenses than to go with the cheap lenses. And some people even say if you can only spend money on a really good lens or a really good camera body, a lot of people will say get a decent camera body, but get an amazing lens. And the lens really does make a difference. And the quality of the lens, I mean, just think of it same as cars. You know, you can buy a Kia, and then you can buy, I don't know, I don't love cars, but whatever, like a high brand of a car, a Lexus or an Audi or something like that. That Kia is probably not going to last you as long as those more expensive cars because it's not made out of materials that are as durable. Does that make sense? So I chose to get the L series lens, which it's a hefty price. I mean, it was around $2,000 something, I want to say. But the focusing is really great. I don't have as many hit and miss shots with the focus, and they last forever. So yes, if you're just starting out and you can't afford the L series lens or the higher end of lenses with whatever camera brand you have, Nikon or Sony or whatever, you can get the cheaper version of these lenses. There's a 24-70 2.8 for Canon that's only a few $100s. It's just probably not going to last you a decade, and it's probably going to have a little bit more hit and miss with how in focus the pictures are. But those are things that you can work with. If you're taking a million shots during a session, then having a few shots that are out of focus is not going to be a deal breaker. But if you want to invest and buy a more expensive lens, the L series to me is the way to go because they will last forever. So before I had this set up, let me put this down because I feel like I'm just doing this and getting a little crazy. Before I had this camera, the R6 and the mirrorless 24-70 2.8, the camera that I started with way back in 2013 when I bought my first camera, which sounds so weird to say, makes me feel so old. I will be 40 in January and it is kind of freaking me out. But when I think back to the very first camera and lens that I purchased, I still am so happy that I made that purchase. I used it for forever until I upgraded. And I could have done without upgrading, but I really wanted the mirrorless when it came out. So rewind back to 2013 when I was researching cameras and lenses and trying to figure out what to buy. My best friend Katura was already a photographer. She's the one who got me into photography. I actually have my backstory, my brand story already on my channel. If you want to go back and check those out, kind of tells you how I got into photography and what changed my photography and what made my business super successful and where I am now. That might give you a little bit more context as to why you're sitting here watching me right now. If you care to watch, go watch those. But she got me into photography because she was already a family photographer, and I already kind of had an idea of what lens I wanted because the 24-70 is what she used. But of course, I did my research. I was just getting online, Googling things, reading in forums, and, you know, looking at other social media accounts for photographers and just kind of seeing what everybody was saying. So I knew right away that I wanted a full frame camera. I just knew that if I wanted to be serious about my business, I really needed a full frame, and I needed a lens that was versatile so that if I could only buy one, it could work for all of the different sessions that I was going to try to shoot. So I did all my research, and I ended up landing on the Canon 6D, and that was back in 2013. So back then, I want to say that camera body was like around $1,900. I could be mistaken. It's been 10 years, but it was over $1,000. So I got the Canon 6D body, and then I decided to go ahead and splurge and invest in my business so that I could have high quality images right away. And I bought the 2470 EF, which was the old focusing system for Canon. So now the mirrorless is RF, but the older lenses were EF. And I know some of you already know this, but I just try to keep in mind that some people watching may have never even picked up a camera in their life, but they want to get into photography. So EF is the older focusing system that Canon used, and now RF is their mirrorless system. So if you see RF on a lens, it's a mirrorless lens. If you see EF on a lens, it's not mirrorless. It's their older focusing system, which is still fantastic. I mean, I still every once in a while pull out my Canon 6D because I can't let it go. It's still at my studio, and I always like having a backup anyway, just in case for some crazy reason my R6 just decides to not work for me one day. I want to make sure I have a camera on hand to still finish my session with. So I still have my Canon 6D, and I don't have the 2470 lens that I had on it because I traded it in to upgrade to the mirrorless 2470 because that was a really hefty ticket price, but again, totally worth it. But I had the Canon 6D, and I had the 2470 L series 2.8 lens from Canon. So I didn't go off brand. I stayed Canon brand with both the camera body and the lens. And that's what I started with. And I used the Canon 6D with the 2470 2.8. I used that combo for the first 7 years, probably, of me shooting. Again, it's been 10 years, so I can't remember like exact timelines, but basically I bought that when I very first started. It was my very first camera, and I used it all the way up until I upgraded to the Canon 5D Mark IV. And then after that, I only had it for a year, and I just did not like the focusing and the grain and low light situations. So I switched to the mirrorless R6. So those are the only 3 cameras that I've had, but all 3 of those cameras, I used the 2470 2.8 L series lens by Canon. I cannot tell you how much I love this lens. I could not live without this lens. If you took it away from me and told me I had to do a shoot without it, it would literally break my heart. Literally. And for those of you watching who continue to watch, just start keeping a tally of how many times I say literally, and it's going to be a million. So anyway, I started with that Canon camera and lens. I still use that Canon lens to this day. Although it's the mirrorless version, I still love my 2470. I could not imagine doing a session without it. And I'm sure I'll be popping up pictures in here as I'm talking about it to show you what I mean by how versatile it is. But I'm telling you, if you're going to be shooting families and seniors and headshots and products and nature and, sports, of course, there are other lenses that can work absolutely beautifully. A lot of people in sports use the 70 to 200 because obviously you can see a lot further away with it if you're far away shooting sports. But overall, if you're starting out in photography and you're shooting what most of us start out in, which is families and headshots and branding and products and things like that, this 2470 is going to do everything that you need it to. So if you can only buy one lens, hands down, without a doubt, with zero hesitation, I tell every single person the 2470 zoom lens 2.8. So now, I also do love the idea of a 24 to 105 because I only shoot studio work most of the time. So for me, I wouldn't need my f-stop to be low, but the 24 to 105, the f-stop only goes down to f4. And of course, for studio lights, that's fine because with studio lights, I would never go below a 4 anyway. But in my studio, I shoot natural light, lifestyle headshots and branding. So when I'm shooting in my studio, I want to be down to a 2.8 because I love natural light still for my headshots. And you can't really do that. And you can't get beautiful light and airy headshots in my studio if you can't get down to a 2.8. So to me, that's the only reason I wouldn't go for the 24 to 105. I love the idea of being able to zoom into 105 to get really close, beautiful, detailed, up-close portraits of faces, but I'm not willing to trade the 2.8 for the 4. To me, I just need a 2.8 because every once in a while, I still do shoot outside. And like I said, I shoot natural light, lifestyle, headshots all the time. And I need to be able to drop down to a 2.8 to be bright enough in my studio because I usually keep my ISO up around 1250 in my studio. I try not to go above that to avoid grain. But if I only had an f4, I definitely could not get the bright images that I love for my lifestyle headshots. So that is another reason why I say the 2470 2.8 is the way to go because your f-stop goes all the way down to 2.8, which means even in a low light situation or when you're shooting indoors, you can let in enough light into your camera to be able to light your scene beautifully. And just having that 2470 range to zoom in and out, you're just going to be able to shoot so many more shots during your session because you're not moving your body. All the things that I've already gone over, I'm trying not to ramble, but that's just how passionate I am about the 2470. So of course, people are going to be passionate about whatever lens they started in their photography journey with. Some people that I know here personally in Oklahoma City, they love their prime lenses for, especially family photographers. They love their prime lenses, and I get it, but just to be able to zoom in and get those more flattering facial shots, you can't do it with a 35 the way you can when you're zoomed all the way into 70. So if you are going to be shooting closer up on people and farther away, getting full bodies in the shots, the 2470 is the way to go because you get the best of both worlds. And some people say the prime lenses just are a little bit sharper, but to be honest, there's not enough difference in sharpness for me to give away, to let go of the versatility that I get being able to zoom in and out. And if you look at the work that I post on my page, I don't think there's an issue with sharpness, and I have only used a 2470 pretty much my entire career of 10 years. Now, if you have the room in your budget to invest in more than one lens, then you can be more specific about the kind of photography you want to shoot. So I'm just going to give a couple recommendations for secondary lenses that I feel like would work well. Now, for reference, I do not shoot family work. Very rarely do I shoot families, usually only for like holiday minis, and even those are still more on the editorial side. So my 2470 still is what I use for those. But although a lot of family photographers will say they love their 35 millimeter, if you're only shooting families, maybe that would be a great lens for you to get. But for me, because what I shoot is mostly headshots, branding, portraits, high school seniors, and editorial work, studio work, for me, the lenses that I would recommend, which are the lenses that I have, are the 2470, of course. I would never get rid of that. The 2470 2.8, but the other lenses that I have in my bag and at my studio are the super wide angle 16 millimeter lens, because again, I love that drop it low angle and I love distorting the legs and the arms to be crazy long and purposely distorted in the shot to make it look really artistic, really editorial, really outside the box. I love that lens for that. So during my editorial sessions, I may pop off my 2470 just for a few minutes to pop on my 16 millimeter. And then I can get those really elongated, really insanely dramatic shots that elongate people's body and distort them on purpose. And it's beautiful. The 2470 2.8 is what I use most of the time, but the 16 millimeter, which by the way, the 16 millimeter I got goes down to 2.8, which is harder to find in the harder to find in the wide angle lenses, but I chose the 2.8 because again, if I'm using that lens and shooting natural light, I need to be able to let in enough light to light my image inside my studio. So that's why I chose the 2.8, but you can get a cheaper 16 millimeter if the f-stop only goes down to maybe a 4. But that is the second lens that I love. And then the third lens that I have is a 50 millimeter. Now this was a lens that I won in a giveaway. So by the way, photographers, if you see giveaways, for lenses, like from camera companies and lens companies, do the giveaways, because you never know when you might get lucky. I never win anything. I can't stand casinos because I literally never win. I literally never win. I just go in, put my money in, and it takes all my money, and I walk out sad. So I never go to casinos because I hate that, and I grew up super poor. So the thought of just like giving away money freaks me out. But anyway, I digress. The point is, do the giveaways, because every once in a while you will get lucky like I did. So I won a Sigma giveaway, and they were giving away the Sigma Art Series 50 millimeter lens, and that was the only prime lens I've ever owned. And I actually did really love it, because the great thing with the prime lenses is your f-stop can go all the way down to like 1.2 or 1.4 or 1.8. So if you're in a crazy low light situation, or if you are just a lover of bokeh in your image and you want only the person's face to be in focus and you want everything else like super, super blurred behind them so that the depth of field is just absolutely stunning and beautifully blurred, then a prime lens is great for that, because the f-stop can go much lower. So I had that 50 millimeter, and I would use it whenever I was shooting headshots sometimes if I knew that it was a very specific style of headshot I wanted, to where I just wanted their face to be super clear and focused and then everything behind them to be super blurred, because sometimes I would be shooting in their offices or in their homes and the backgrounds would not be ideal. Like, they would not be backgrounds that I think would be beautiful for pictures. So when you can drop all the way down to a 1.2 or a 1.4 on your f-stop, all of a sudden that ugly background is just completely blurred and you can't even really tell what it is. So that is the situation that I would pull out my 50 millimeter lens for. And a 50 millimeter is a good enough lens to get up close portraits without the distortion that you would get in a 35 millimeter or a 24 millimeter. So if you were going to shoot for a prime lens, I would say a 50 millimeter if the majority of what you're shooting is portraits. So the 50 millimeter, I think it went down to a 1.4 was what I had for the Sigma lens. And then the latest lens that I picked up, and I don't have a ton, I've been shooting for 10 years and I only have 4 lenses. But the most recent one that I picked up, because I do so many editorial sessions, like editorial branding sessions, I created these sessions called the Boss Babe Editorial. And the reason I created them was because I shoot a lot of estheticians. A lot of people in the beauty industry come to me because my work is very like editorial and very like bold, and it stands out in your feed a lot. Because I use backdrops, and because I'm getting really cool angles, and because I'm incorporating props in really cool ways into their shots. So I shoot a lot of estheticians and injectors and things like that. And so we're using like tools in their hands. Like, imagine if you're shooting an injector and they have this tiny little syringe. You cannot get super duper duper close on that syringe and not have focusing issues if you're only in a 70, like a 24-70 or a 35 millimeter or a 50 millimeter. So in these instances, when I wanted to be super up close, where literally their face is the entire image, and then you've got a syringe like on their face in the shot. For these kinds of images, I just felt like I was falling short in my work, so I decided to get the 100 millimeter lens. So I got the 100 millimeter lens, and I do think it goes down to a 2.8 because, again, I use these lenses in the natural light area of my studio as well, so I need to be able to go down to 2.8 to add enough light into the image that it's not going to be too dark. So whenever I pop on this 100 millimeter lens, I can get insanely close on people's faces, and there's hardly any distortion in their features. Their nose doesn't come out to the camera, their forehead doesn't come out to the camera, the face doesn't like elongate and come out this way like a lot of the other lenses will do when you get super close up on them. And with that 100 millimeter lens, I don't have to be right here in front of my client's face. Like, imagine if a client was at a photo shoot and you had to be right here on their face to get the shot. Obviously it's awkward. Obviously you don't want to do that. So when you have this 100 millimeter lens on your camera, you can still be pretty far back from them, but in the view of the lens, when you have the camera up to your face, you're literally like their face is filling the entire frame. So that's why I love my 100 millimeter lens. If you're going to be shooting beauty and I don't know, like if you're shooting a client who's a makeup artist and you need their face to fill the entire frame so that you can get all the details of the makeup. If you're going to be shooting any kind of beauty work where you would need super up close shots of their faces, hands down, the 100mm will be your best friend for those kind of images. But again, in general, you're not only going to get super up close shots of people's faces. So if you can only buy one lens, it should definitely be the 24-70, in my opinion. I am just one photographer. I am not telling you that this is the end all be all answer, but just in my experience and the kind of work that I shoot, the 24-70 is hands down the way to go because it is the most versatile. But if you are shooting very specific things, then that might change. But overall, if you're shooting families, like I said, and seniors and branding and headshots and things like that, the 24-70 is going to do every single thing you need it to do. So the only thing that I would do when you have money to add another lens is think about if you're going to be doing super up close work, then maybe go with a higher millimeter, like 100mm or an 85mm. If you're going to be shooting, you know, not close up work where you're going to be more full bodies and needing to zoom out and things like that, then maybe go for a 50mm if you want a prime lens so that your f-stop can go down super low. But yeah, those are my overall recommendations for lenses. That 24-70, I'm telling you, it never, ever, ever comes off this camera. Ever. I mean, I shoot 99% of the images you see on my social media with this 24-70. So it is definitely the way to go if you want something versatile that's going to work for all of your sessions, if you can afford to purchase it. Again, you can get a cheaper 24-70 2.8. It's just not going to last you as long. So like I said, I had my first 24-70 for 7 years, and if I hadn't traded it in to upgrade to this, I could have kept it and it would still be working just as well today as it did then. But if you have the money to splurge, I would definitely do the L series lens so you don't have to worry about focus, and you can keep it forever and it's going to last you a long time. But yeah, that is my go-to camera setup for all of my sessions, whether I'm shooting studio work with my backdrops or whether I'm shooting natural light work outside or indoor, like in my headshot kind of office area of the studio. This works for everything. Works for everything. So I highly recommend the R6 if you love the idea of a mirrorless system. But no matter whether you have mirrorless or not, the 24-70 2.8 is definitely the lens that you want to buy. So that is my spiel today on lenses. I just wanted you to see it literally coming out of my bag because I never ever shoot without this. So that camera will never leave my camera bag and the lens will never leave my camera bag because I just use it for every single session. And just a little side note, a little bonus tip for you guys. If you were like I was when you were like out shooting, you would literally just have all of your SD cards like in a Ziploc bag or in the side of your camera bag and you could never find them, or you were always getting them lost. This little baby has made my life so much easier with shooting. So if I need to switch out cards during a session, I can pull this out and I can even arrange the cards. So like, and I got this from Amazon, by the way, super cheap. I'll link it in the description box if I can find my purchase on Amazon years ago. But I mean, and I'm sure they have many things like this, but you want an SD card organizer. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but this, like I have my empty cards on this side, and then I have my session cards on this side. So anytime I shoot a session, I never delete the memory card until I've already edited and put those images in PixieSet. That way, if for some reason my computer crashes before I finish editing or something, I can start all over editing because I still have the card. So anyway, I can organize them, you know, the ones on this side that have stuff on them, the ones on this side that are empty and ready to be popped into my camera. But I'm just telling you in general, and it's got this like foam cushion inside, so the cards really stick and stay in there. They don't like slide out if you know, like are hard on this, like I am sometimes. This thing has been such a lifesaver for me during my sessions, and it just keeps all my cards in one place, and then I just pop it into my bag, and I've always got it with me. So that's just a little bonus side note, but it definitely helps. So get yourself an SD card organizer. so that you can keep all your cards in one place and not be losing them or searching for them all the time. I literally used to just keep them in Ziploc baggies and like throw them in my camera bag, and then I could like never find them when I was digging in there. So definitely get that. But I think that is it. I'm sure I've rambled on far too long. I'm trying, really honestly guys, I'm trying to be better about not rambling, but I'm just a talker. Even when I teach my workshops and stuff, I love making people feel comfortable, and I just love talking and like sharing all of my information. So sometimes I can just kind of like give away too much, but this is just me. It's part of my personality. It's not going to change. If I'm doing videos a year from now, I'm probably going to ramble on almost just as much as I ramble right now, but at least when I edit, I can cut some of it out for you guys so you're not watching an hour-long video. But just to recap, if you can only buy one lens, no matter what your camera brand is, find a lens as close to a 24-70 millimeter 2.8 f-stop lens that you can find. The 24-70 zoom lens is the most versatile lens that you can use if you are starting out in photography and shooting a bunch of different things. So definitely buy that zoom lens first before you think about buying prime lenses, unless you're shooting something very, very specific and your niche is something that just needs a different kind of lens. But overall, for most of us when we're starting out, you cannot go wrong with the 24-70. It's like almost impossible. I would say yes, it is impossible to go wrong with the 24-70. So do yourself a favor. If you have not bought a lens yet, or if you have a lens but it's not a zoom, run your little butt to the store or to your internet and buy a 24-70 or whatever kind of zoom you feel like is going to work for you. But having a zoom will change your life and make your sessions so much easier and let you shoot more during your sessions. So I hope that this was helpful. I know that it's hard making decisions when you're just starting out in photography, so I'm just here to give you my advice and tell you what worked for me throughout the last decade of my business. And lenses is something I feel really passionate about because that 24-70 has just done me so well. I could not have asked for a better lens to carry me through my photography journey, and that's why I still use it today, and I'll use it forever until I am too old and decrepit to stand up and take pictures anymore of people. So I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. I hope that this was useful, and I hope that you will come back and watch another one of my videos. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will hopefully see you guys soon.